The first video for our unit is sort of review, but we're going to get started with adding and subtracting decimals. If you go ahead and pull out your spiral notebook, on the top, give it a title, Adding and Subtracting Decimals. Skip a line and then go ahead and write our standard. Today's standard is 6.ns.3, NS standing for number sense. It's fluently add and subtract decimals. Fluently meaning something that you don't have to think about. If someone is fluent in another language, they can converse with people, they can talk without even having to stop and figure out what a word means. So fluently means adding and subtracting decimals without thinking about the process that is happening. Skip one more line. So the third or fourth line, you're going to write, I can add or subtract decimals by lining up the decimal point in the problems. And for each lesson, you're going to have the same format. The title, the standard, and the I can statement.
All right. Now we're going to start the notes on the actual lesson itself. So right underneath where you put that title information, let's jot down the steps to our adding and subtracting decimals problem. A lot of you may already be familiar with this. This is probably a review for some of us, but you still need to write it down. That writing down helps you kind of build it into your memory, and it's also a good resource to go back to if you need to later on. So our steps are, the most important one is you have to line up the decimal point in both numbers. You want to line up the numbers that are in the ones place with the ones place, the tenths with the tenths. Otherwise, you're not truly adding the numbers together. Sometimes one decimal is going to be longer than the other, so we're going to add in some extra zeros at the end just to make them even. Then we just go ahead and add or subtract. You might have to do some carrying, might have to do some borrowing. The decimal just slides straight down in the problem into our answer. Go ahead, jot that down. Feel free to pause it if you need to get it down. Don't feel like you got to try to keep up with this as we go. Then we're going to do this first example together. 45.67 plus 6.7. Remember, our first step is you have to line up the decimal point in the problem. So in this case, I'm just going to move my numbers over until my decimal point is lined up. The 6 is in the ones place, it's underneath the 5 in the ones place. We're lining up those place values. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab my pen. Oh, that's a really bad line, sorry. I'm going to add in my extra 0 here, and then it's just an addition problem. 7 plus 0 is 7. 6 plus 7, is 13. So I'm going to carry a 1 over the next column. That decimal point just slides straight down in the same spot. 1 plus 5 is 6, plus 6 is 12. Carry the 1. 1 plus 4 is 5. So I get an answer of 52.37.
We want to check before we move on to make sure our answer makes sense, and 46 plus 6 or 7 is about 52, so we did it correctly and we can move on to the next problem. Our next problem is 9.8 plus 15.607. In this case, we have one longer number into the tens, hundreds, thousands place, plus a tens problem. So we're going to go ahead and line them up, bringing the 15.607 down. Go ahead and add our zeros in to even them both out so that they're both to the thousands place. So adding a 0 into the hundredths and the tenth spot. And then we're going to add, I get the easy one, 7. 0, 8 plus 6 is 14, carry the 1, 10 plus 5 is 15, carry the 1, and we've got 25. Don't forget to bring that decimal place down. And our final answer is 25 and 407 thousandths. It's a pretty accurate answer, so we're ready to move on.
Mrs. King gave her a nice fancy answer, spelling out her decimal point there.
Yeah, precise.
All right, now we're going to do subtraction. So same idea, you have to line up that decimal point, but now you might have to worry about things like borrowing in these problems. So adding those extra zeros is going to be extra important for these problems. Again, jot down these notes, and then we're also going to go write down our example problem. So all of this needs to be included in your notes. So we're going to do 4.378 minus 2.664. In this case, they both have the same number of decimal places. So it's really just a matter of lining up those two problems. In this case, they're even, so we don't need to add in extra zeros. Oop, my line's getting a little bit better. Now I need to subtract. 8 minus 4 is 4. 7 minus 6 is 1. I can't do 3 minus 6, so this is where we go next door and do some borrowing. We're going to borrow from the 4, so it becomes a 3. and that gives me 10 to add on to my 1. So this becomes a 13. If you'd rather, some people like to write it up above just to make it easier to read. 13 minus 6 is 7. Decimal point just slides down. 3 minus 2 is 1, which makes sense. We got 4 something minus 2.5, just as a rough estimate, gives me about 1.5 here. So we know we're in the ballpark for our answer.
In our next example, I see something that doesn't line up, so we have to be careful on what we do. Go ahead and bring your numbers down. 12.8 minus 3.675. We're going to need to add zeros in the 100th spot and the 10th spot so that we're even top and bottom. And in this example, we're going to have to borrow right off the bat. So your zeros are going to go ahead and become 10s. Borrow from the 8 and make that a 7. Borrow from the 10, make that a 9. That becomes 10. I rewrite. 10 minus 5 is 5.
Here, just to make Mrs. King happy, I'll write my 10 up there. Sorry.
10 minus 5 is 5. 9 minus 7 is 2. 7 minus 6 is 1. 12 minus 3 is 9.
Or if you feel like you need to do your borrowing there, some people like to borrow even there. Still gives you your 9, and then make sure to bring down that decimal point.
So we're going to check our accuracy. 12.8 kind of rounds up to 13. 13 minus 3.5 is roughly 9. 9 and 125 thousandths is our answer. At this point, we are moving on.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead on her. Okay, now here's the ones that you got to be careful of. What happens if one of your numbers doesn't have a decimal point? In this case, it's a whole number. So the best way to think about it is that decimal point's really hiding there. Mathematicians just tend to be lazy. They don't like to write something if they don't have to. So in a whole number, the decimal is always right at the end of your number. The easiest way to think about it is money. $23, another way to write it is 23.00. That means the same thing. So here we have 6 minus 3.74. So we need to write 6 with its decimal point. The decimal is right at the end. And then we add in those zeros so that lines up with our 3.74.
Borrow.
Now we need to do our little borrowing. Mrs. King's going to make me rewrite everything, so this becomes a 10.
That becomes
and then I
a
borrow, and it becomes a 9.
Jeez.
And that becomes a 10. I'm doing it properly.
Yes, you are. 10 minus 4 is 6. 9 minus 7 is 2. 5 minus 3 is 2. Don't forget to bring the decimal point down.
All right, last one. If you think you've already got this down, you feel comfortable with it, feel free to try this one on your own. And go ahead and pause it if you want to. Follow along with Mrs. King as she does the problem.
So 28 is going to go ahead and change into 28.000. And then we're going to bring the 15.183 and start our borrowing. Starting with the 8, the 8's going to become a 7. We're going from the 10 to the 9. And then the 10, the 9, and the 10. Thanks. 10 minus 3 is 7. 9 minus 8 is 1. 9 minus 1 is 8. Putting your decimal down. 7 minus 5 is 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. Did it right? Yeah.
I think we're good.
Good.
28 minus 15, so about 12 or 13. Sounds about right. Now, if all of this kind of going all the way over to the 8 to do your borrowing and kind of carrying it back, if you're having trouble with that, that's a good thing to come in and see us for some extra help. Hopefully we're familiar with it, maybe just a little rusty, but if you're really having trouble on how to set up that problem and tackle it, please come see us for some extra help. And we'll do some practice tomorrow in class as well.
Okay, your turn. You are going to remember to line them up, add or subtract them, and then bring that decimal point straight down. The easy thing to remember. Line them up, add or subtract them, pay attention to that sign, and then bring down that decimal and check your final answer. You're going to go ahead and press pause, write down these 3 problems, and try them on your own. Then, when you're ready, you're going to hit play and see if you got them accurate or not.
Make sure you hit pause. Don't go see the answer until you're ready.
Cheaters. All right, here we go.
All right, hopefully you've tried these on your own. So Mrs. King, get us started on the first one.
14 and 8 tenths minus 7.35. We have to add a 0 on the top row. Hopefully you did that. You change the 0 to a 10. 8 goes to a 7. And we subtract 10 minus 5 is 5. 7 minus 3 is 4.
Bring down our decimal point.
14 minus 7 is 7. Your answer should be 7 and 45 hundredths.
All right, next one, 83.508 plus 106.9. Again, line up the decimal point. So in this case, 106.9 is going to line up here. Kick in those extra zeros to make both numbers the same length, and then we just add. 8 and 0 is 8, 0, 5 and 9 is 14. Bring down my decimal point. 1, 3, and 6 is 10. 1 and 8 is 9. And I get an answer of 190.408.
Watch that handwriting to make sure everything is lined up vertically. Example 3, we've got 14. We got to add the decimal point and a couple of zeros, minus 9.63. Make sure that 9 is directly underneath that 4. And go ahead and subtract. You did 14 changes to the 13, 10 to the 9, 10 minus 3.
I'll write it up here for Mrs. King just so she doesn't yell at me.
10 minus 3 is 7, 9 minus 6 is 3, 13 minus 9 is 4. Our final answer for that problem should be 4 and 37/100. How'd you do?
When you see these with just 2 decimal points, a good way to think about it is money, $14 minus $9.63. Sometimes it'll help you in seeing out how to write out 14 with the decimal in there. When you think about it like money. All right, you're all done for today.